Some betrayals come with a knife. Mine came with a phone call. From my own son. On a Tuesday morning while I was drinking coffee on a porch he thought he'd already taken from me. He was wrong. The phone rang at 8:14, his name on the screen. I answered. Dad, we've made a decision. We're listing the cabin. You need to be out of the Kettner property by the end of the month. But first, my name is Jude Logan, 71 years old, retired civil engineer, father of 2 boys I raised with every calloused inch of these hands. I moved to Cedarville, Wisconsin in 1982, the same year I married my late wife, Renee. We bought a modest split level on Harmon Ridge Road, raised the boys in that house, buried a dog named Chester in the backyard, and built something most people spend their whole lives chasing. A life that actually felt like ours. But this story isn't about that house. This story is about 2 lakes, 2 cabins, and one son who got too greedy too fast and forgot that his dad didn't just build things, he planned them. Welcome to Dad's Raw Revenge. Get settled, because this one is going to take you somewhere. Hit that like button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. The first cabin, the one everybody knew about, sat on Kettner Lake, 14 miles northwest of Cedarville, just past the grain silos on Route 9. I bought that lot in 1993 for $32,000, which back then felt like betting your soul. Renee thought I'd lost my mind. I told her, give it 20 years. She rolled her eyes and handed me a sandwich. That was love. I built that cabin with my own hands over 3 summers. Brad was 9 the first summer. Tim was 6. The Kettner Lake cabin became the family landmark. Every 4th of July, every deer season opener, every graduation party and birthday weekend that needed somewhere to breathe. When Renee got sick in 2014, we spent her last good summer there. Brad and Tim drove up every weekend. We sat on the dock. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. When Renee passed in 2015, that cabin became something sacred to me, a place where I could still hear her laughing at the water. What I never told the boys, what I never told anyone, was that 6 months after Renee's funeral, I bought a second property. But we'll get to that. By 2023, Brad was 39. Divorced once, remarried to a woman named Kelsey, who had expensive taste and a gift for spending money that hadn't been earned yet. Tim was 36, good-natured Tim, softer than Brad. The kind of man who goes along with things because disagreement makes him uncomfortable. I loved my boys. I want to be clear about that. I loved them the way you love something you built from nothing. But I had watched Brad change over the years, slowly. The way rust takes offense. You don't notice it until the whole thing is compromised. He started talking about assets at Thanksgiving. Started asking about my plans with a little too much enthusiasm. Started steering conversations toward my property like a man who'd already done the math. I noticed. I just didn't say anything. That November, cool enough for a jacket, one of those Wisconsin mornings where the fog sits on the fields like it's paying rent. My phone had already delivered the blow at 8:14 a.m. But what I haven't told you yet is everything that led to that moment. Everything that made Brad Logan bold enough to call his 71-year-old father with a deadline. It started 2 days earlier. Brad called on a Sunday. His voice had that tone, the careful one. The one he used when he was about to say something he'd rehearsed. Hey, Dad. Casual. Too casual. Brad. I took a sip. You're up early. Yeah. Listen. He cleared his throat. That throat clear. I'd known that sound since he was 16 and had something to confess. Tim and I have been talking. Here we go. Okay, I said. About what? About the cabin. Pause. The Kettner place. I set my coffee down. Slow. What about it? Dad, look. You're 71. You're up there alone most weekends. The property taxes have gone up. The maintenance is... when's the last time you replaced that dock section on the east side? Last spring. Right, but... Brad. My voice was flat. Say what you're saying. Another throat clear. Tim and I think it's time to sell it. You think it's time? I repeated. It makes financial sense, Dad. The market up there is insane right now. We had a guy, a realtor, Mark Benson, out of Pewaukee. He thinks we could get $380,000, maybe $400,000 for it. We had a realtor. When did you talk to a realtor, Brad? Silence. Brad, we wanted to get information before we brought it to you, so you'd have the full picture. The full picture. My son got a realtor before he got my permission. Let that sink in. And Tim's on board with this? I asked. Yeah, Dad, we both think, put him on. What? Put Tim on the phone, shuffling, muffled voices. Then Tim, quieter, already apologetic before he said a word. Hey, Dad. Tim, this your idea? I mean, we talked about it together. That's not what I asked. A long pause. Brad brought it up first. But financially it could. Okay, I picked my coffee back up. I've heard enough. Dad, don't be like that. We're just trying to look out for. I'll call you back. Dad. I hung up. I sat on that porch for 40 minutes. Just me, the crow, and the kind of silence that has weight to it, the kind that presses on your chest. Was I angry? Not yet. Was I hurt? Son, I was devastated. 71 years old, and my boys had gone behind my back, hired a realtor, and decided what to do with something I built with my bare hands. But here's the thing about being 71 that nobody tells you. You stop reacting. You start responding. There's a difference. A big one. I went inside, made a third cup of coffee I didn't need, sat down at my kitchen table on Harmon Ridge Road, and opened the bottom drawer. The one Renee used to call my serious drawer because nothing good or light ever came out of it. I pulled out a manila folder. Inside that folder was a deed, not the Kettner Lake deed. The boys knew about that one. This deed had a different address, a different lake, a different story entirely. I read it slowly, even though I had it memorized. I smiled for the first time all morning. 2 days later came that 8:14 phone call. Brad's voice. Calm. Decided. The voice of a man who thought he'd already won. Dad, we've made a decision. We're listing the cabin. We've already signed with Mark. You need to be out of the Kettner property by the end of the month. Short pause. We're doing this with or without you. I let the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. Then I said, Brad. What? Which cabin do you think I'm calling you from right now? He would. There's a particular kind of silence that isn't empty. It's loaded. Like a held breath before a car crash. Like the 3 seconds between lightning and thunder when you're not sure how close it's going to hit. That's the silence Brad gave me after I asked him which cabin I was calling from. I counted. 1, 2, 3. Dad, what are you? You're at the Kettner place. I didn't say that. Then where are you? I'm exactly where I need to be, Brad. I leaned back in my chair. The wood creaked the way old things do. Comfortable, unhurried, settled. You go ahead and list Kettner. You and Mark Benson from Pewaukee. You do all of that. Dad, you're not making sense. I make plenty of sense. You're just not used to listening to me. I paused. We'll talk soon. I hung up again. Let him sit with that. Now let me tell you about the second cabin, because this is where the story turns. In March of 2016, 6 months after I buried Renee, when the grief was still fresh enough to taste, I took a drive. No destination. Just me and my truck and a tank of gas, and Wisconsin doing what Wisconsin does in early spring, which is look beautiful and miserable at the same time. I ended up 43 miles northeast of Cedarville, past Oconomowoc, past the stretch of county road where the pine trees get so thick they block the afternoon sun. I found myself on the edge of a lake called Garrison Lake, smaller than Kettner, quieter. The kind of place that doesn't show up in travel magazines because the people who know about it prefer it that way. There was a property for sale, corner lot, sits elevated above the waterline, which any engineer will tell you matters more than people think. The structure on it wasn't a cabin. It was a lodge. 3 bedrooms, stone fireplace, a wraparound porch that faces west, which means every single evening you get a sunset. I bought it in April 2016 for $260,000. Renee and I had been savers our whole lives. We drove used trucks and never once bought anything we couldn't pay for outright. That was the philosophy. Brad thought it was old-fashioned. Brad thought a lot of things. I put the Garrison Lake Lodge inside an irrevocable trust. Named it the Renee Logan Family Trust. Myself as lifetime beneficiary. A separate estate attorney in Milwaukee, not the same one the family knew, handled every document. I told exactly one person on this earth about that property. Not Brad. Not Tim. My old friend, Walter Pruitt, retired county recorder, 68 years old, knew land documents the way some men know scripture, chapter, verse, and consequence. Walter kept my secret for 7 years, never asked why. That's what a real friend looks like. The boys spent 7 years coming to the Kettner cabin, asking about my plans. eyeing the property like it was an inheritance they were already owed. And the whole time, the real prize was sitting 43 miles away on Garrison Lake. Quiet, patient, waiting. Like me, the listing went up on a Wednesday. I know because Walter called me Jude. His voice had that tone, the one that means brace yourself. Kettner Lake Cabin just hit the MLS, listed under Bradley Logan as co-owner. Asking price $390,000. I exhaled slow. How fast? Already got showing requests. Mark it up there as hot. Mark Benson's a decent agent. They might move this in 3 weeks. All right, Walter, I said. Let it run. You sure? I'm sure. Jude, if they close on that sale, then they close, Walter. Let it run. He went quiet for a moment. You're a cold man sometimes, Jude Logan. I'm a prepared man, I said. There's a difference. I want to stop here and tell you something important about what Brad didn't know. What neither of them knew. Yes, I was on the Kettner deed, co-owner with the boys, which was arrangement I'd set up years ago thinking it would simplify estate planning. What I had never told them was that co-ownership on a Wisconsin property deed does not mean one party can unilaterally authorize a sale. You need all parties to sign the closing documents. All parties. Meaning me. Mark Benson, the realtor from Pewaukee, either didn't know this or didn't bother to check. He took Brad's word that the family was aligned. He listed the property. He scheduled showings. He generated an offer within 18 days. A couple from Naperville, Illinois, Ted and Connie Marsh. 40-something professionals looking for a Wisconsin lake house to weekend in. Good people, probably. Wrong transaction entirely. The offer came in at $382,000. Brad called me, practically vibrating through the phone. Dad, we got an offer. Strong one. 382. Dad. $382,000. I heard you, Brad. We need your signature. On the... He stopped. I could hear the gears turning. The slight hesitation when a man realizes he's walked into a room that's shaped differently than he expected. On the closing documents. There it was. Do you? I said. Dad, it's just a formality. He. You're a co-owner, so they need all signatures. It's just how it works. I let that breathe for a moment. Let him hear his own words. Brad, I said finally, do you remember what I asked you on the phone last week? What? I asked you which cabin you thought I was calling from. Dad, what does that have to do? Everything, I said. It has everything to do with everything. I'll call you Thursday. The Marshes need an answer by... Thursday came. I drove to Milwaukee. I had an 11 a.m. appointment with my estate attorney, Raymond Castillo. 49 years old, third-generation Mexican-American, sharpest real estate mind in Waukesha County, and a man who enjoyed a well-constructed legal surprise, the way some people enjoy theater. I laid the full picture out for him across his conference table, the Kettner listing, the offer, Brad's call, the deed structure, all of it. Raymond leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, and looked at me the way a chess player looks at a board 3 moves from checkmate. Jude, he said slowly, they listed a property they cannot legally sell without you. Correct. And a buyer is sitting at 382 waiting for a closing. Correct. And your son called this a formality. His exact word. Not a big smile, a small, precise one. And the Garrison Lake property. Irrevocable trust. Renee Logan Family Trust. Recorded April 14th, 2016. Milwaukee County. Unreachable. He nodded slowly. So what exactly do you want to do here, Jude? I folded my hands on the table. I want to let it get all the way to the closing table, I said. I want Brad to shake that man's hand. I want Tim to stand there in his good jacket. I want Mark Benson to lay out his folder full of documents. I paused. And then I want you to make one phone call. Raymond looked at me for a long moment. You planned this, he said. I planned for the possibility, I corrected. There's a difference. He laughed. Actually laughed. Jude Logan, you are a genuinely terrifying man. I'm a prepared man, Raymond. He reached for his legal pad. All right. Let's talk about that phone call. The closing was scheduled for a Monday morning, December 3rd, 9 a.m. The title company was a firm called Lakeland in Delafield. Clean office, good coffee, the kind of place where large amounts of money change hands with very little ceremony. Brad had called me twice over the weekend to confirm I was on board. Once to ask if I needed directions to the office. Directions. To Delafield. 40 minutes from my house. He thought I was losing it. He thought the old man needed directions. I told him I'd be there. I was there 12 minutes early. Brad walked in at 3 minutes to 9. He was wearing his good jacket, navy blue. Tim was right behind him, hands in his pockets, eyes moving around the room the way Tim's eyes always moved when he was uncomfortable. The Marshes, Ted and Connie, were already seated, pleasant-looking people. Ted had a firm handshake and the energy of a man who'd been looking forward to this for weeks. Mark Benson was at the head of the table with his folder, efficient, ready. The title officer, a woman named Paula Jennings, had the documents stacked and organized. I sat in the corner with my coffee. Brad saw me and relaxed visibly. The tension dropped out of his shoulders. He actually smiled, that smile. The smile of a man who thinks he's already won. Dad. He crossed the room, hand extended. Glad you made it. I shook it. Wouldn't miss it. So we're good. We're good, Brad, I said quietly. He went to his seat. Paula Jennings began her opening remarks. Mark Benson uncapped his pen. Ted Marsh leaned forward, ready. And then, my phone buzzed. Text from Raymond Castillo. Ready when you are. I stood up. Every head in that room turned. Jude, Paula Jennings said, is everything... I apologize, I said, calm as a Sunday morning. There's a call I need to take. Raymond, my attorney, he needs to speak with someone in this room. I looked at Mark Benson directly. Specifically you. Benson blinked. Me. You. Brad stood up halfway. Dad, what is? Sit down, Brad. The tone in my voice. Something in it. Something final, he sat. I stepped into the hallway and called Raymond. 30 seconds later, I walked back in and handed my phone to Mark Benson. I watched his face as Raymond Castillo spoke. Watched the color change. Watched the pen lower. Watched the moment a man realizes the transaction he built is standing on air. Benson said 3 words into the phone. Just 3. Say that again? Short pause. Then nothing. He handed me my phone back. Looked at Brad. Looked at the documents in front of him. Looked at Ted Marsh, who was now leaning forward with an expression that had shifted from excitement to alarm. Mr. Logan, Benson said carefully, and he was talking to Brad now, not me. This closing cannot proceed. Ted Marsh's chair scraped back. Excuse me. The property cannot be transferred without unanimous co-owner consent, full consent. Documented and verified. Benson's voice was controlled, but his jaw was tight. There is a structural issue with this transaction that should have been caught at listing. Should have been caught at listing. That's attorney language for, this is your fault. Brad turned to me. Slowly. The way you turn when you already know what you're going to see. Dad. I picked up my coffee cup, took a sip. Let the silence do what silence does when it has something to say. You know what your mother used to tell me? I said. She said, Jude, you think 6 steps ahead and you never tell anybody. She meant it as a complaint. I set the cup down. Turns out it was a compliment. Tim put his face in his hands. Ted Marsh was on his phone calling his own attorney. Mark Benson was staring at his folder like it had personally betrayed him. And Brad just stared at me. My oldest son, 39 years old in his good navy jacket. What did you do? He whispered. I smiled. The first real, full, unhurried smile I'd had in weeks. Son, I said, we haven't even gotten to the part about Garrison Lake, yet. He didn't know about Garrison Lake. Nobody did. And that right there, is where everything changes. If you have been listening for a while, drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button while you're at it, and be sure you're subscribed. There are moments in a man's life that don't announce themselves. They don't arrive with fanfare or warning. They just appear, quiet, inevitable, already decided. And all you have to do is stand still long enough to let them unfold. This was one of those moments. The Lakeland Conference Room in Delafield, Wisconsin had gone from a closing to a crime scene in under 4 minutes. Not a crime scene with tape and badges. The other kind. The kind where everybody in the room slowly realizes that something has gone terribly, irreversibly wrong. And the only question left is who's going to have to answer for it. Ted Marsh was standing now. His wife Connie had her hand on his arm, the way wives do when they're trying to keep their husbands from saying something that ends up in a deposition. Ted was a composed man. You could see him working at it in real time. I want to understand, Ted said, his voice measured and deliberate. Are you telling me this sale cannot close today? Paula Jennings, the title officer, looked like she wanted to dissolve into her chair. Mr. Marsh, there appears to be a co-ownership issue that we've been under contract for 3 weeks. Ted's composure was thinning at the edges now. We had inspections done. We paid for an appraisal. My kids are already telling their friends about the lake house. No, Connie. We drove up here from Naperville. Mark Benson raised both hands. Mr. Marsh, I understand your frustration completely, and I want to assure you that we are going to get to the bottom of... The bottom, Ted said, turning to look at Benson with the flat eyes of a man doing math he doesn't like the answer to, is that you listed a property you apparently didn't have the legal right to list. The room went silent. Benson opened his mouth, closed it. I almost felt sorry for the man. Almost. Brad had not moved. He was still in his chair, still in his good navy jacket, still staring at the table in front of him like it might offer him an exit. Tim sat beside him, hands folded, looking at nothing. Tim had the expression of a man who had followed someone else's directions onto a road that just ran out of asphalt. I stayed in my corner. I did not gloat. I did not grandstand. I sipped my coffee and I waited, because the story wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. Raymond Castillo walked in at 9:24 a.m. He'd driven from Milwaukee. Dark suit. Leather briefcase. The unhurried energy of a man who is exactly where he planned to be. He shook my hand first. Then he set his briefcase on the table, snapped it open, and placed 2 documents side by side in the center of the room, like a dealer laying cards. Gentlemen, Raymond said. And he included everyone, the Marshes, Benson, Paula Jennings, Brad, Tim, all of them. My name is Raymond Castillo. I'm Mr. Logan's attorney. I want to walk everyone through exactly where we stand, because clarity is going to serve all of us better than confusion right now. He pointed to the first document. This is the Kettner Lake deed, co-ownership between Jude Logan, Bradley Logan, and Timothy Logan, established 2009. Under Wisconsin statute, a co-owned property requires unanimous written consent from all parties for transfer of title. That consent was never obtained from Mr. Jude Logan. He looked at Benson. The listing was premature. The contract is unenforceable. This closing does not happen today. The room was very quiet. Ted Marsh, to his credit, looked like he understood he was witnessing something that had nothing to do with him. He touched Connie's hand. She nodded. Mr. Castillo, Ted said, composed again now. What are our options? Raymond turned to him with the full attention of a man who respects a good question. You have a legitimate breach of contract claim against the listing agent and potentially the sellers, meaning Bradley and Timothy Logan, for entering into a purchase agreement on a property they lacked authority to sell. Your inspection costs, appraisal fees, and any related expenses are recoverable. He paused. I'd suggest speaking with your own attorney, which I imagine you're already doing. Ted looked at his phone, nodded once. Raymond snapped his briefcase shut, and that was that. Mark Benson left first. He shook no hands. He said nothing on his way out except a quiet, tight-jawed word to Paula Jennings about following up on Tuesday. The door closed behind him, with the specific sound of a man who knows he's about to have a very unpleasant conversation with his broker. The Marshes left second. Ted stopped at the door and turned back. He looked at me, not at Brad, not at Raymond, at me. I'm sorry this happened to you, he said. I nodded. Enjoy whatever lake house you find, Ted. He almost smiled. Almost. Then they were gone. Paula Jennings gathered her documents with the quiet efficiency of a woman who had seen transactions collapse before, and knew that lingering helped nobody. She was out in under 3 minutes. And then it was just us. Me, Raymond, Brad, Tim. Raymond looked at me. I gave him a small nod. He excused himself to the hallway and closed the door behind him with the quiet click of a man who knows when a room needs to be left alone. Brad spoke first. So that's it? His voice was different now. The confidence had drained out completely. What was underneath it was something rawer, younger, almost familiar. You let it get all the way here. You let us list it. Let us get an offer. Let us sit at this table. Yes, Dad. Yes, Brad, I did. He pushed back from the table, stood up, walked to the window and stood there with his back to me, hands in his pockets, looking out at the parking lot. You could have stopped at any time, he said. I could have. You could have called me after that first conversation and said, Brad, you can't sell that property without me. You could have said that. I could have, I said again. He turned around. And I want to be careful here about how I describe what I saw on my son's face. Because it wasn't just anger. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was something more complicated than both of those things. It was a man who had looked in a mirror and seen something he wasn't prepared for. "Why didn't you?" he asked. I leaned forward in my chair. "Because you needed to see it," I said. "Not hear it. See it. All the way to the end." I held his eyes. "You hired a realtor before you asked your father's permission. You signed a listing agreement on a property that had my name on the deed. You called me to say I had a deadline to get off land I built with my own hands." I paused. "What exactly did you think was going to happen, Brad?" He had no answer. "Sit down," I said. Not cold, just final. He sat. I stood at the head of the table, the spot where Paula Jennings had been organizing documents 20 minutes ago, and I looked at my boys, really looked at them. Brad in his navy jacket, Tim with his hands folded like a man in a church he no longer believed in. I took my time. "I'm going to say some things," I said quietly. "I need both of you to just listen. Can you do that?" Tim nodded immediately. Brad stared at the table, then nodded once. Slow, good. I pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat down after all. Not because I was tired, because I wanted to be eye level with them, father to sons, not plaintiff to defendants. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "I'll be on Kettner Lake every deer season opener until my body decides otherwise. You are welcome there, both of you. That hasn't changed." Tim exhaled. His eyes were wet at the corners. Tim always felt things first and thought about them second. That was never his worst quality. "Brad," I folded my hands on the table, "the Marshes are going to sue you. Not me, not Tim, though Tim's name may get pulled in depending on how their attorney structures it, but primarily you, because you signed the listing agreement. You shook Mark Benson's hand. You entered into a purchase contract on a property you had no unilateral authority to sell." I paused. "Raymond estimates their claim. Inspection costs, appraisal, travel, legal fees, emotional damages, somewhere between $18,000 and $24,000. Brad's jaw tightened. "That's not a catastrophic number," I said, "but it's not nothing either. And Brad," I waited until he looked up at me, "Kelsey is going to find out." Something moved across his face. Fast. Like a shadow. "She already thinks this was done," I said. "You told her, didn't you? $382,000. She's already spent some of it in her head." He said nothing, which was its own answer. "That conversation is yours to have," I said. "I won't interfere with your marriage. But I want you to understand that every consequence sitting in front of you right now, every single one, has your name on it. Not mine, not Tim's. Yours. Because you moved first. You moved fast. And you moved without asking the one person whose name was on that deed." Brad's throat worked. "Dad, I'm not finished." He closed his mouth. I turned to Tim. "Tim." My youngest son looked up at me with those wet-cornered eyes that had been threatening to overflow since Raymond laid the documents on the table. "I know you didn't start this. I know Brad came to you with a plan already half-formed, and you went along because that's what you do. Because disagreement makes you uncomfortable, and Brad makes disagreement feel like a personal attack." Tim exhaled, shaky. "But son, you're 36 years old. You are not 9. You are not standing in my driveway waiting to see which way your big brother runs before you follow him." I leaned forward slightly. "You knew this wasn't right. I could hear it in your voice on that first phone call. And you did it anyway. That matters." "I know," Tim said quietly. "Dad, I know." "Good." I sat back. "Then what I'm about to tell you won't come as a surprise." I reached into my jacket pocket and placed a single folded document on the table between us. I didn't unfold it, just let it sit there. Both of them looked at it. "I spent yesterday morning with Raymond," I said. "We made some changes." Brad's eyes came up slowly. "What kind of changes?" "The kind a man makes when he realizes he needs to be more deliberate about his legacy." I kept my voice even. "Measured. The Kettner Lake property. The cabin you listed, the cabin you handed a stranger the keys to without my knowledge. I've restructured the deed. It is now held solely in my name. Both of your names have been removed." Dead. Flat. Silence. "Dad," Tim started. "It's done, Tim. Already recorded at the county courthouse as of yesterday afternoon." I looked at Brad. "You wanted to sell it so badly. Now you can't. Because it's not yours to sell anymore. It never really was. But now the paperwork agrees with that fact. Brad's hand on the table curled slowly into a fist, not aggressive, the way a man's hand curls when he's absorbing something that physically hurts. And the Garrison Lake Lodge, I continued. The Renee Logan Family Trust. I've updated the successor beneficiary designations. I finally unfolded the document, slid it to the center of the table where both of them could see it without having to reach. Walter Pruitt's daughter runs a land conservation nonprofit out of Madison. Beautiful organization. They preserve working waterfront properties across Wisconsin. Keep them wild and accessible for the public. I smoothed the document flat with one hand. When I'm gone, Garrison Lake goes to them. The air went out of the room. Not dramatically, not all at once, just slowly, like a tire losing pressure. Like two men realizing simultaneously that the thing they'd been circling for years, the thing that made them hire realtors and sign listing agreements and call their father with deadlines, was never going to have their names on it, not ever. Brad pushed back from the table, stood up, walked to the window again. Same window as before, same parking lot view, but everything outside it had shifted. A nonprofit, he said. Flat. A nonprofit, I confirmed. Dad. He turned around, and here is where I want to be precise about what I saw. Because it wasn't rage. It wasn't the entitled frustration of a man who'd been caught scheming. It was something rawer than that. Something I hadn't seen on Brad's face since he was a teenager and had broken something he couldn't fix. I didn't think it would go this far. I know you didn't, I said. I thought we were helping. The taxes, the maintenance. You're up there alone. Brad. My voice was gentle, but it didn't move. You hired a realtor before you asked your father. Whatever you tell yourself about your intentions, that's the truth of what happened. A man who is trying to help asks first. Tim was crying quietly, not loudly. Tim never did anything loudly. Just 2 slow tracks down his face that he didn't bother wiping. Is there anything left? Brad asked. And he meant it the way a son means it, not the way an heir means it. For just that moment, he wasn't 39 years old in a navy jacket. He was 9 years old with a crooked nail and sawdust on his shoes, looking up at me from the floor of an unfinished cabin. Lord, is it something? What time does to people. What greed does, what fear of being left out does to men who were once just boys handing their father nails. I looked at my oldest son for a long moment. I laughed, not a big laugh. Not a cruel one. Not the laugh of a man gloating over a defeated enemy. Just that specific quiet laugh that starts somewhere deep and comes out slow. The kind Renee used to say meant I knew something nobody else in the room knew yet. Brad recognized it immediately. His eyes changed. Good. He should be paying attention. I let the laugh settle, let the room get very quiet around it. Then I leaned forward and folded my hands on the table one last time. Brad. My voice was even, unhurried. Garrison Lake Lodge was appraised last month. You know what Raymond's appraiser came back with? He said nothing. Waiting. $1.1 million. The number landed like a stone dropped in still water. I watched the ripples move across both their faces. Brad at the window. Tim at the table. That lodge. I said it slowly so every word had room to breathe. That property you never knew existed. The one sitting 43 miles northeast of Cedarville, on a hill facing west, with a wraparound porch and a stone fireplace, and a sunset that'll make you believe in something again. I paused. That was going to be your inheritance, both of yours, divided equally, the way your mother would have wanted. Silence. The specific kind that has physical weight. You were about to sell Kettner Lake for $382,000. I let that number sit next to the other one, so they could feel the distance between them. Split 2 ways. $191,000 each. I looked at Brad directly. You threw away $1.1 million to get $191,000. Tim made a sound. Not words. Just a sound. The kind that comes out of a man when something hits him somewhere he wasn't protecting. Brad didn't make any sound at all. He just stood at that window, and I watched my oldest son do the math he should have done before he ever picked up the phone and called a realtor. I wasn't hiding Garrison Lake to punish you, I said quietly. I bought it because I needed something that was mine. Something that still felt like your mother. Something nobody could put a price on. I paused, but I always intended for it to reach you eventually, when I was gone, when it was time. That's all you did. You got impatient, and you rushed the timeline. and in doing so, you changed the destination entirely. I buttoned my jacket. $1.1 million. I said it one final time. Not to twist the knife, just to make sure it was real to them. Fully real. The way consequences need to be real before they mean anything. That was going to be your inheritance. Hope it was worth it. I picked up my coffee cup for the last time. It was cold now. I drank it anyway. Then I put the document back in my jacket pocket. You're still my sons, I said. Both of you. That doesn't have a deed. That doesn't go in a trust. Nobody can list it or sell it or show up at a closing table and take it away. I buttoned my jacket, but it has to be earned back. Brad, call an attorney today, not tomorrow. I looked at Tim, and Tim, go home and sit with what you know about yourself after today. Don't run from it. Sit with it. I walked to the door. Dad. Tim's voice cracked at the edges. I stopped, turned. We're sorry, he said. And he meant both of them. I could see Brad's shoulders drop slightly at the window. His version of agreement. His version of sorry. I nodded once. I know you are, I said quietly. I know. Raymond was waiting in the hallway, leaning against the wall with his hands in his pockets, like a man who had nowhere more important to be. How'd it go? He asked. Like it needed to, I said. We walked out together into the December morning, Wisconsin cold. I sat in my truck for a moment before starting the engine. I drove northeast, past Oconomowoc, past the county road where the pines swallow the afternoon light. 43 miles from Cedarville, I turned down the gravel path that the world didn't know about, and pulled up in front of the Garrison Lake Lodge as the last of the December sun went flat and gold across the water. I sat on the west-facing porch. Just me. Just the lake. Just the kind of quiet that costs nothing and means everything. Renee, I thought, you would have had something to say about all of this. You would have shaken your head at Brad. Felt every bit of Tim's tears. Probably told me I was too calculated for my own good. Then you would have handed me a sandwich. I poured a drink, raised the glass toward the water. This one's yours, I said out loud. All of it. Always was. The lake held its ground the way it always had. Still, unhurried, settled. Like the man who bought it. The Kettner Lake cabin still stands on Route 9, 14 miles northwest of Cedarville. It has my name on the deed now. Just mine. The way it always should have been. Brad called Raymond 3 days later about the Marsh situation. The settlement came in at $21,000. He paid it. Kelsey did not take it well. They are working through it, which is more than I expected and exactly what he deserves to work through. Tim called me the following Sunday, just to talk. No agenda, no angle, just his voice and mine, and 40 minutes of the kind of conversation we used to have before money got in the way. That was a start. Mark Benson received a formal complaint filed against his real estate license with the Wisconsin Department of Safety and Professional Services. I did not file it. The Marshes did. Some consequences don't need your help arriving. The Garrison Lake Lodge remains exactly where it's always been, on a hill, facing west, inside a trust that no one can touch. When I'm gone, it goes to people who will love it. Walter Pruitt came up for a weekend in December. We sat on that porch and watched the ice start to form at the edges of Garrison Lake, and didn't say much of anything for long stretches at a time. That's the thing about real friends, and real places, and a life built deliberately and protected fiercely. They don't need a lot of words, they just need to last, and this one will. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from. I will see you on the next one.